So here's a big question. How do we, as a society, decide who gets a real shot at success? And maybe even stranger, what's the price we're willing to pay for things like safety and progress? Now, these sound like questions for a philosophy class, right? Well, believe it or not, economics has some surprisingly concrete and sometimes, yeah, pretty controversial answers. So let's dive into the hidden math that quietly shapes our world, starting with a story of success that you might not expect. All right, let's kick things off with a story of some pretty remarkable growth, one of the real silver linings to come out of the pandemic era. What you're looking at here is a boom in entrepreneurship, and it's happening in a huge way within minority communities. And I'm not talking about a small uptick. This is a major shift that's actually reshaping the American economy from the ground up. So let's take a closer look at this engine of opportunity. What's really fueling this change? And what does it actually look like for the people involved? And look, this isn't just some abstract number on a spreadsheet. For people who are right there in the thick of it, like Ari Roman, the change is real, and it's dramatic. It's a boom that's been fueled by all sorts of things. From pandemic layoffs that sparked people to start their own thing, to a real grassroots push to support Black-owned businesses. And the numbers? Wow, they really tell the story. If you look at the data from the Census Bureau since 2019, the share of self-employed people who are Hispanic or Black has just shot up. I mean, it's grown way, way faster than the growth among white workers. It really paints a picture of a changing business landscape. And this chart just makes it crystal clear. You can really see the scale of that shift. The growth for Hispanic and Black entrepreneurs, it isn't just a little higher. It's in a completely different league. This is a real, tangible reshaping of who owns small businesses in America, and it's opening up whole new paths to building wealth. It's an incredible story of progress, right? It's really encouraging. But here's the thing. While these new doors are swinging wide open for some, there's a really old barrier that's still holding back another huge group in the economy. And their path to success, well, it looks very, very different. So while that engine of opportunity is roaring to life over here, there's this long-standing economic roadblock that's still firmly in place for millions of women. It has a name. It's called the motherhood penalty. And let's be super clear here. The motherhood penalty isn't just about, taking some time off for maternity leave. It's a well-documented systemic problem where women's careers and their earnings take a hit after having kids in a way that men's careers just don't. This visual right here says it all. You can see the two paths diverging. For a lot of men, having a child has a pretty neutral or sometimes even a positive effect on their career trajectory. But for so many women, it marks the exact moment their earnings potential just stalls out. That gap that opens up right after childbirth, it often never closes again. And you might be thinking, well, maybe there are other reasons for this, right? But this is where the economic research gets really clever. By studying women who went through IVF, some who ended up having kids and some who didn't, researchers were actually able to isolate the effect of the child itself, totally separate from a woman's career ambition or other life choices. And the conclusion was stark. The penalty is a direct result of having a child. Okay, so talking about these economic penalties, it kind of brings us to an even bigger and, frankly, more mind-bending question. We've seen how economics can measure the cost of having a child, but how does it handle the ultimate valuation? How does it calculate the price of a human life? Well, governments and economists use this tool called the value of a statistical life, or VSL. And right away, we have to be super clear about what this is and what it isn't. This is absolutely not a price tag on you or me or any specific person. Instead, it's an estimate of how much we, as a society, are willing to spend to reduce risk just enough to save one statistical life. So how on earth do they come up with a number like that? It sounds impossible, right? Well, it basically breaks down into a few steps. First, they look at something called a risk premium. Think about how much more a logger gets paid than an office worker to accept a riskier job. From that extra pay, they can figure out an implied value people place on avoiding that risk. And that number, that becomes a guideline for policymakers trying to decide if a new safety regulation, say for clean air, is actually worth the cost. So what's the number? What did they land on? Well, back in 2006, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency used a figure of $7.4 million. That was the value they used to weigh the costs and benefits of things like the Clean Air Act. The logic is, if a regulation costs less than this amount for every life it's predicted to save, it's considered economically a good idea. So what does this all mean? When you peel back all the layers, you start to see that these economic tools aren't just cold, hard numbers. They're actually our collective values written down in a kind of hidden math. It can feel really uncomfortable, maybe even a little creepy, to put a dollar figure on something like a life. But as The Economist magazine puts it, the alternative is actually much worse. Without some kind of framework like the VSL, these huge life and death decisions would just be arbitrary. This process, as imperfect as it is, at least forces us to transparently think about how we value the safety and well-being of everyone. So, when you look at it all together, the incredible rise of new entrepreneurs, the stubborn penalties that mothers still face, and this wild, astonishing calculation of a life's statistical value, you see that economics is so much more than charts and graphs. It's a story we tell ourselves about what and who we value. The final question really is, what does this story tell you about the world we've built?